right, you can take it.
All right, good evening, everyone. This is the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, January 31st, 2017. So we'll call it to order. We have no minutes to approve tonight. We have future meeting dates. We're actually posted for meeting tomorrow night with the Warrant Committee, if any members of us are able to go to the Warrant Committee meeting in support of the Town Administrator's budget presentation. Our next meeting would be February 21st, and then we have some proposed March dates of the 7th and the 21st, if those work.
Those work for me.
Okay.
Affirmative.
Okay, do we have anyone tonight for citizen speak on any item on the agenda other than either of the two sign applications or the medical marijuana application? Is there anyone who's here to speak on anything other than those two topics, or three topics? Okay, seeing none, we're going to begin our meeting tonight with some sad news. We're going to have a moment of silence for Dr. Morton Wolfe. Dr. Wolfe was a 25-year member of the Board of Health. Until very recently, he was a member of our Animal Shelter Building Committee, and he served for many years the town of Milton very generously. He donated his time and his talent as the pro bono animal inspector for the town. So he was a wonderful person, and he's going to be missed, especially by his former colleagues on the Board of Health. So we will have a moment of silence for Dr. Wolfe. Thank you. On another note, we're going to start tonight with some bittersweet news, which is that our former or outgoing town administrator, Anne Marie Fagan, today is her last day as an employee of the town of Milton, and we're very sad to see her go, but we're very happy for her that she'll be able to enjoy a lot of time with her family and her grandchildren. So we have a special proclamation for Anne Marie Fagan that we've all signed. We're going to read, and then we're going to ask her to come up, and maybe we'll get a photo in front of the flags. And we thank you all for your indulgence.
I'm trying to make Anne Marie cry.
We hope not. That's not the goal. We hope that won't happen. So our proclamation reads, and this is from the Board of Selectmen. Whereas Anne Marie Fagan began her career with the town of Milton on September 13th, 1995, as an employee of the Parks and Recreation Department. And whereas Anne Marie Fagan transferred to the Selectman's office on November 17th, 1995, and was appointed Assistant Town Administrator on July 15th, 2000, in which capacity she also served as the town's Human Resources Director. And whereas Anne Marie Fagan became Milton's first female town administrator on March 11th, 2013, eventually becoming the first Milton town administrator to serve under special legislation that strengthened the day-to-day management responsibilities of the town administrator. And whereas included among her achievements as town administrator are the negotiation of an agreement for the redevelopment of the Hendry's property, the reorganization of several departments to create efficiencies, the development of a new financial planning model and a long-term financial forecast, the successful negotiation of many collective bargaining agreements, advocacy for consolidation of school and town administrative functions, and oversight of the implementation of a new payroll system for all employees, including paperless wage statements, direct deposit, and biweekly pay periods. And whereas Anne Marie Fagan was usually the first person to arrive for work at Town Hall in the morning and the last person to leave in the evening. And whereas for the past 21 years, residents of the town of Milton, town employees, and numerous volunteer boards and committees, particularly the Board of Selectmen, the Personnel Board, and the Warrant Committee, have relied upon Anne Marie Fagan's hard work, good judgment, and strong work ethic. And whereas, while Anne Marie Fagan was working hard for the town of Milton, she was also a devoted mother to her 4 children, Eric, Jessica, Christopher, and Kayla, and in recent years, grandmother to her 3 cherished grandchildren. And whereas Anne Marie Fagan is retiring from her employment with the town of Milton, effective this 31st day of January 2017, after 21 years of distinguished service. Now, therefore, we, the Milton Board of Selectmen, thank Anne Marie Fagan for her distinguished service to the town of Milton and its residents, wish her well in her retirement, and hereby proclaim January 31st, 2017 as Anne Marie Fagan Day in the town of Milton. Anne Marie, please come up and join us. was going to take a picture for the Milton Times. Yeah, we just say one more thing about Anne Marie. As I think as many people in this room know, Anne Marie has generously offered to, she had offered to stay on during the transition, and she's been here for a couple of months working with our new town administrator, Mike Dennehy, to ensure that we had a very smooth transition. And we're very grateful to her. We know her, we have her on speed dial, we know where she lives, we know her phone number.
That's it.
So we're probably going to be back in touch with her whenever we have questions, especially when we need some institutional knowledge. So we're glad she's not going to be too far away. So thank you very much, Anne Marie, for all that you've done. And David has an announcement.
Again, congratulations, Anne Marie. Obviously, you put so much time and effort into helping the town of Milton and its residents, and it's greatly appreciated. And while you will be missed, I know that Mike Dennehy will be carrying on the work that you have done for so many years, and we graciously appreciate it. But I do want to add something separate on a high note, as we leave with you on a high note, that we have with us today a member of the Arrows of Light, Cub Scout, Den 5, Patrick Plunkett with us. He's doing a little project on government, and so basically he's going to be, there's Patrick, we can wave to him back there. He's going to be basically listening into our meeting. He may come again, and going to be asking some questions of our board, maybe via email at some point in time. And I think that it's a great project, and it's great to see that the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts who have been before us before are taking such pride in their town and trying to find ways to give back. So thank you for coming tonight, Patrick.
Welcome, Patrick. Okay, we're a couple of minutes late starting, but we have two public hearings on signs, and then we have a continued public meeting on the medical marijuana application. So our first hearing, with the town planner, Bill Clark, like to join us, and if there's anyone from the sign company, we'll start with Coffee Break Cafe. If there's anyone from either the Coffee Break Cafe or the sign company present tonight, please feel free to join us.
Hey, Bill.
Good evening, Bill. Okay.
We have the coffee break at Central Ave, which is there's writing in the window, there's writing on the sign band. The reason it's before you is because the sign band sign is a little bit larger than our zoning bylaw allows. It's in the business district. It's the same size that it was for the last two companies. There's a band on it now, but there will be a metal sign placed over the existing metal sign, replacing that banner that's up there now. Sign Review Committee has looked at it and agrees with it. The Planning Board has looked at it and agrees with it.
Okay, we did receive a communication from the planning board that they were in support of this. The sign review committee is meeting at the same time tonight over in Town Hall, so they are not going to have a representative join us this evening, which we have been doing. Do we have anyone here tonight from the public who would like to speak in favor of the recommendation of the sign committee? Seeing none, do we have anyone from the public who's here to speak in opposition to the sign application? Okay, seeing none. We are required to make some findings, and they are that there's a reasonable need for the sign, that there's a reasonable basis for exempting the sign from the standards, and that the exemption, if we were to grant one, would not have a substantial detrimental effect on the community. We have a proposed motion if we're inclined to agree with the sign review committee and the planning board.
Okay, I'll make a motion, whereas on March 1st, 2016, the applicant received a letter of denial for a proposed sign at 24 Central Avenue on the basis of Section 3C3A of the Milton zoning bylaw, which limits the size of exterior signs to a square footage equal to 0.4 times the length of the facade, or 40 square feet, whichever is less. And Section 3C5 of the Milton Zoning Board bylaw states, quote, "For approval of a sign not otherwise allowed in the chapter, the Board of Selectmen shall determine that A, the applicant had a reasonable need for the sign, B, there is a reasonable basis for exempting the sign from the applicable standards, and C, the exemption of the sign from such standards will not have a substantial detrimental effect on the community." The Board of Selectmen determines that A, the applicant operates a business, Coffee Break Cafe at 24 Central Avenue. The address is located in the business district. The sign complies with all other requirements in the zoning bylaw regarding signs in a business district except for the size. And B, the proposed sign is of a similar size to that of a business which previously occupied this location. And finally, C, the proposed sign is proportionate to the signs of neighboring businesses, and as Coffee Break Cafe is located entirely within the business district, there would be no substantial detrimental effect on the community by allowing a sign larger than allowed by zoning, and therefore approves this sign request.
Second.
Okay, do we have any discussion on the motion? And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're going to open our next public hearing, which is for the Peel Pizza, new pizza shop in East Milton, for a lit sign. And we'll ask Mr. Clark, we'll open the public hearing, we'll ask Mr. Clark to speak to this sign also. And we have reviewed a package of materials.
Yes, the sign has gone through, the sign review committee, it's gone through planning board. Again, they both have accepted what the sign review committee has determined. One, that the letters are a little larger than our zoning allows. They are going to be acrylic letters raised. They're painted in a specific manner addressed by the sign review committee. The peel, that's the big spatula that flips the pizza, will be made out of marine plywood so that it doesn't delaminate, doesn't come apart, doesn't peel apart up as it's attached to the wall. Both boards liked it and want to move it forward. It is lit, it's lit by the existing gooseneck lamps that have been there through the last two companies.
So there's
And
no
they will-
change in the lighting?
There's no change in the lighting. There will be a new awning, same frame, just a new awning material.
But consistent with all the other awnings and consistent with
It's
all
the
the other
same
lighting
frame
in that whole
coming right
block.
down. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's one that's a little bit different, but we're working with them right now to get them in conformance with the others.
All right.
I'll
Is
propose,
it- wait, Before we're still in a public hearing, is there anything else that you want to add, Bill, before we ask if there's any public comment?
No.
Okay. Do we have anyone here tonight who wants to speak in favor or in support of the application of Peel Pizza? Or anyone from the public who's here tonight to speak in opposition to the sign request from Peel Pizza? Okay, seeing none. Would you,
I'll propose a motion, whereas on January 3rd, 2017, the applicant received a letter of denial for a proposed sign at 538 Adams Street on the basis of the Section 3C of the Milton zoning bylaws, which prohibits the illumination of a advertising sign, as well as Section 3C3 of the Milton zoning bylaw, which limits the size of exterior signs to the square footage equal to 0.4 times the length of the facade, or 40 square feet, whichever is less. And Section 3C5 of the Milton zoning bylaws, for approval of a sign not otherwise allowed in the chapter, the Board of Selectmen shall determine that A, the applicant has a reasonable need for the sign, B, there is a reasonable basis for exempting the sign from the applicable standards, and C, the exemption of the sign from the such standards will not have a substantial detrimental effect on the community. The board has determined that A, the applicant operates a business, Peel Pizza, at 538 Adams Street. The address is located in the business district. The sign complies with all other requirements of the zoning bylaw regarding signs in the business district except for size and illumination. B, the business operates until 8 or 9 p.m. most days, so illumination is necessary for patrons to see the sign. Signs of businesses elsewhere on Adams Street, including Ichiro Sushi, Mr. Chan's, Dunhollow Real Estate, are of similar size and illumination. C, the Proposed lighting for simple dark sky compliant low wattage lamp is similar, is the same illumination that lit the previous sign at this location, and the lamps are designed to shine on the sign without overspill onto the street. As the business is located entirely in the business district, and the proposed sign is proportional to the size of signs of adjacent businesses, there would be no detrimental effect on the community by allowing the sign larger than allowed by the zoning, and therefore approve this request.
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Clark was indicating that is it Mr. Higgins is here from Peel Pizza? All right, Mr. Higgins, we've just asked if there's any opposition or support for the sign, but would you like to come up and address anything about the sign to us? If you would, please feel free to come up and
Not
sit at the
necessary,
table
but
and join
if you want
and take a mic. Okay, all right. I did have one question. It says 8 or 9 p.m. on most days. I think we would probably want to be more specific than that. Is there already determined a time for the closing?
Well, I'm sure on Friday nights it'll probably be 9, but most nights during the week it'll probably be around 8 o'clock.
Okay, so probably depend, all right, so maybe we want to
Just
leave it as
straight
it is, depending on the
figures.
language. Okay, depending on the day.
Half an hour after they close.
Okay. Do we have any other comments or discussion? Then all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. All right, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Clark. The next item on our agenda is a continued public meeting of New England Patient Network's request for a letter of support or non-opposition regarding a medical marijuana facility at the site of the building known as the Swift Hat Shop. It's at 98 Adams Street. We had a public meeting on December 6th, and we've continued it since that date to tonight. We have received some additional materials from the applicant. At the meeting on December 6th, we received a number of comments from people who were here and who came up to speak to the board, and we've also received a number of emails from many people. We will give the applicant a chance to make any additional remarks that they would like, and if there are any public comments, we will certainly take public comments. Since the meeting was on December 6th, that was only less than a month after the ballot question for the recreational marijuana had passed by the voters, and since that time, there's been some additional programs that we've been at, and I did want to report to my two colleagues on some updates on the recreational law that I think would impact our decision, or at least would impact my thinking on this, and I think may impact the board's position. As we all attend the Mass Municipal Association's annual conference every year. We go to different programs at it, so we take part in different seminars. There was a presentation by attorneys, including some city solicitors, but also by one of town council's colleagues at that presentation regarding the marijuana law. And then just last week, a number of us, Mr. Clark, Health Director Caroline Kinsella, and several members of our Substance Abuse Coalition and the Board of Health, and I, on behalf of our board, attended a program sponsored by the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office regarding the recreational marijuana law. And I think that's relevant to this discussion because what really came out of those meetings was that, and many people who spoke at our December 6th meeting mentioned recreational marijuana and concern that if a medical marijuana facility were permitted at this location, eventually it possibly could become a recreational marijuana facility. What really came out of those meetings is that the recreational law is very unclear, has a lot of flaws, it leaves a lot of open questions. And there is a provision in it that says, well, let me back up for a minute. Our board has explored initially with town council, and Mr. Valerio Romano, who's the attorney representing New England Patient Network, mentioned this at the meeting on December 6th, that it is possible for the board to put a question to the voters, asking the voters to ban facilities that would cultivate, manufacture, or sell recreational marijuana in the town. And we could do that through a ballot question. There'd also need to be a town meeting action, and it's not even clear which should come first and which should come second based on the way the law is written, and that's because the ballot question was written by the marijuana industry, and it's a different setup from what we learned at the Friday seminar. Colorado was an opt-in state. Massachusetts' law is opt-out, so communities would need to put a question to the voters in order to opt out. One segment of the law that I thought was very relevant was that there is a provision that says a town may not prohibit recreational marijuana establishments, quote, in any area in which a medical marijuana treatment center is registered to engage in the same type of activity. And the discussion at the district attorney's program last week was that it's very unclear. Even if there were a vote by the voters, because of the way the law is written, it refers to a bylaw and a vote by the voters. It's really unclear whether, if a medical marijuana facility were registered, even if the voters were to vote to prohibit recreational marijuana on a ballot, whether that would have any effect if there's already a facility registered. Now, this is a request for a letter of support. We're not the authority that would issue a license. That would be the State Department of Public Health. But that, I think, is very timely information and is relevant information. And I wanted to make sure that the board was fully aware of that. To me, that's a very important factor. So are there any comments from the board before we continue our meeting? This is not a public hearing, so the same rules about opening and closing a public hearing and testimony from all sides is not the same for a public meeting as it would be for a public hearing.
Yeah, other than what you're saying about the medical is, it's very murky, it's very unclear.
Yes.
You got one section that says you can write regulations and bylaws, but they can't be unduly restrictive. And then you got another section saying that you can ban it altogether. So I don't know how you can ban it altogether if you can't write regulations that are unduly. I mean, they seem to
The
be.
two different, so you can ban the sales, they did get into some discussion on that. You can ban the sales or the cultivation or again the manufacturing. There's also, and you could either do it for one or more types, which would, so you could also include it for all of them, sales,
Yeah.
recreation.
There's a lot of
sales,
gray area in this.
cultivation, manufacturing. There is a lot of gray area, but that's a question that really has come up is because of the ambiguity in the law. That is a concern to me with acting to support a letter of, to issue a letter of support on top of some other issues that are of a concern. But are there other comments from the board, or is there any sense of how the board would like to approach tonight's hearing other than giving the parties an opportunity to talk?
I think give everybody an opportunity to talk and listen again.
Okay. It is a bad evening, and you know, I know we're supposed to get some more snow tonight, so we'd like to, it's a smaller crowd than we had the last time, but we'd probably like to try to move this along as quickly as possible so that we can ensure that everybody can get home safely before the snow starts up again. Why don't we ask the applicant, and we have all had an opportunity to review the additional material, but Mr. Romano, if you or your client would like to come up and present additional information, please feel free to do so.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Valerio Romano for the New England Patient Network. Thanks for your time. Just quickly to touch on the discussion of the adult use or recreational marijuana law. One of the items that we submitted leading up to this was a proposed host community agreement. In that agreement, in paragraph 7, we put very definitively in writing, and we would do this in any format that you wanted, that this group at that site would not do adult use or recreational marijuana without permission of the Board of Selectmen, which, so this is about medical, and it's clearly about medical. So that while there may be some ambiguity in the law that the voters passed, there's no ambiguity whatsoever in the goals to help the patients of the Commonwealth through this medical dispensary by the New England Patient Network. And I don't know how else to make that clear, but that is absolutely what's being proposed for 98 Adams Street is a medical marijuana dispensary. And in writing, we'll commit to keeping it that way, and we already have proposed that specific language.
Mr. Romano, just on that point, I just want to ask you a follow-up question.
Sure.
The concern, I think, would not only be would New England Patient Network decide at some point they'd like to get into recreational marijuana. The concern, speaking as one member of the board, would be if the law is very unclear, would, you know, if a medical marijuana facility were to be approved for this location, then an entity that's completely unaffiliated with New England Patient Network that's just looking to operate recreational, presumably, because of this ambiguity, would be able to come in and operate in the same area and seek approval to operate in the same area. So that would be a concern that we're not just talking about New England Patient Network, we'd be talking about unaffiliated entities also.
So if the town were able to have a vote of the people of the town to ban adult use or recreational, then they could do that. But if New England Patient Network sites there, then what you said is absolutely correct in the language of the ballot initiative and the act now to regulate and tax marijuana like alcohol, is that if there's that particular use in a particular zoning district, then it's automatically essentially zoned like for that use, for adult use or rec. But you can still issue reasonable zoning restrictions. So the same thing, special permit, you know, the health and safety of the citizenry, parking, traffic, all the same criteria that go into citing a medical marijuana dispensary, you would still be able to employ with your zoning bylaw for adult use or rec. So this doesn't really, by allowing New England Patient Network to continue down the application process, right? So the letter that we're asking for tonight isn't by any means the end of this process. We still have to go through a special permit and the state process and building permits. This is just sort of the very beginning of the process. But you would still be able to have that leverage and those safeguards for an adult use or recreational marijuana facility in the future. So I'm not certain how it is determinative that all of a sudden you're going to have a rec facility in Milton because you allow New England Patient Network to come help sick people in the area. I do get the concern, but I don't think it rises to the level of prohibiting, you know, what's a valid state use from a good group to help sick people by, you know, sort of worried about what may happen in the future, which is very, you know, sort of tangential. So, I mean, I just don't think it should prohibit New England Patient Network for coming in because of that ambiguous language in the ballot initiative.
Well, I just want to follow up on that, and I appreciate your comments, but I think also, though, that it isn't clear, though, that it could allow someone to come in potentially in the future, and that's our responsibility as a board, as we, you know, represent the voters of the town. So it's our, you know, to do the due diligence to make sure that we are 100% certain, okay, without any cloud of doubt that could potentially happen, so.
Well, so as far as representing the voters of the town, the voters in Milton passed medical by 60%. They passed the zoning bylaw, which authorizes that location by 2/3. So if we're talking about representing the voters of the town, we should be getting this letter.
Well, they did, but they also voted down, Valerio, they voted down by more than 10%.
Adult use.
Adult use, and that's what I'm specifically, you know, stuck on here.
Yeah, but I get that. So we don't have to go back and forth. I think we understand each other. You know, we're not here to do adult use. We're here to do medical, and the voters passed that by, you know, 60%. So, so just, you know, we have this presentation, but I don't think we need to run through it because it's largely what we presented at the last hearing. But we did present some additional material, which I know the board has had an opportunity to review, and I just thought I could touch on it quickly.
Sure.
You know, and so we can just keep moving things along. We don't want to go through the whole same presentation that we did last time, unless there's some issue that the board has, you know, as far as security or anything else, you know, patient access, what it takes to become a patient, all the things we talked about. I'm not certain it would serve us much to rehash all that. So just to touch on, you know, some of the additional information that we presented to the board after the last hearing. One of the things that we presented was a proposed host community agreement, which is fairly good for Milton, I would say. It guarantees a one-time $50,000 upfront payment, a minimum of $150,000 per year, with a 3% of gross revenue. So that's just gross right off the top. All of our records would be open to the town of Milton to make sure that you're getting, you know, that 3%. Based on what's happening in other dispensaries around the Commonwealth and looking at what we think here, we think we could do somewhere around $9 million in business. So we're talking around, at least $250,000 going into Milton from citing this business. Now, we're talking about a 500 square foot footprint in a building that's been vacant for 20 years and is almost literally falling down. And we're offering $250,000, just not even tax revenue, property tax, employment, local control, for something that was passed by 60% of Milton voters. And so it almost seems like a no-brainer. And, you know, just not to get back to the adult use thing, but it's just a shame that would prohibit citing this, you know, this incredibly positive thing for the town of Milton. You know, it's a significant amount of money. And, you know, one of the things about oversight and local control I think is important. If you look at what's happening in Quincy at that dispensary, the Quincy Police Department will be the first ones to tell you that there's no issues with that dispensary. They're very positive about what's cited there. And so that same type of control and oversight would be available to Milton. We'd work closely with your police department. In fact, since your last hearing, we actually sat down with the deputy police chief and went over all of the issues that the police department had. Our meeting was certainly over an hour. And, you know, out of that meeting, the Milton Police Department, of course, we didn't get some endorsement, but it was pretty clear that they felt like, you know, the security issues are going to be handled. The state has significant security criteria in the regulations, and the police department, you know, really walking away from that meeting, it wasn't our sense, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Julius, it wasn't our sense that the police had some significant issues with us citing, or any, for that matter, that were really spoken to us. And, you know, we gave every opportunity for them to give us those issues so we could address them. Also, since the last meeting, we were able to sit down with the Substance Abuse Coalition, and we felt like we were, you know, we had a very positive discussion. It was certainly well over an hour, and of course, we don't have their endorsement necessarily either, but we felt like we were able to largely respond to their issues and at least committed to working with them in the future, and hopefully some of the host community agreement funds that would go back into Milton, a significant portion of that would go to the valuable programs that the coalition's doing in Milton. So both those things I think were valuable, and we were encouraged by the interaction that we had with these important groups. So since the last meeting, you know, the host community agreement is one of them. We presented another thing that came up, and it was a request at the last meeting, was some draft some financials, and we presented those as well. And that shows that $9 million or thereabouts in revenue. It shows a lot of our major costs, our tax payments, and there's definitely a line item right in there for that $250,000 plus going back to the community in Milton. Another thing that came up at the last hearing that we presented information on was, you know, switching to a for-profit. And I think this goes to the adult use or recreational concern. And I get it. I think the board hopefully is satisfied that at least in the case of New England Patient Network, we're committed to just doing medical. So maybe this, you know, I won't belabor this point because, you know, we're willing to put that in writing. And so, but we can't just switch to a for-profit company. We would have to either merge with another for-profit company or dissolve our company entirely. And in order to do that, we'd have to give up our medical dispensary license. So it's not something that we could just take a vote of the board of directors and all of a sudden become a different company. So another thing that came up was the master plan issue. And how does New England Patient Network's proposal fit into the master plan for Milton operating there near the water? And we believe it fits pretty well, actually. So we've had that vacant building for the last 20 years. We would renovate that building, bring it up to spec in a historic fashion, work with the Milton Historical Commission and the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen and any other stakeholders that want to participate to make that building what people want it to be. And it would really beautify that location, that area. And then also would bring in new people. So new people would be shopping there. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but my office was able, and it wasn't for New England Patient Network, but for another group, we were able to site a dispensary in Austin Brighton on Harvard Ave. And there were a couple competing bids for different dispensaries that were to site there. And actually the Austin Brighton businesses preferred our competitor. We're the ones who wound up getting the letter of support from the Boston City Council. We were actually the first group that got that. But they preferred our competitor because our competitor was actually closer to their businesses. And they, having studied the issue, said, wow, this is going to be significant money with new people coming in, shopping at our shops, eating at our restaurants. And they actually wanted our competitor to be closer to bring in that new business. So citing this there would be a whole new group of people coming into Milton to shop and spend money. So that goes with the economic development portion of the master plan. You know, the host community agreement also, you know, would go to that economic development portion and rebuilding that to the design specs of the Historic Commission. Another portion of the master plan was promoting healthy lifestyles. So in essence, this is a healthcare facility. This is about being healthy. This is about producing high quality medicine that isn't necessarily produced by Big Pharma, but it's still high-quality medicine. And we see factually that opioid deaths and addiction goes down. 25% less people dying. Reduces drug prescriptions doses by over 1,800 per physician per year. So less prescriptions, healthier people. In the Journal of Urban Geography, they concluded that marijuana dispensaries are akin to drugstores and not locally undesirable land uses. Drugstores, healthy lifestyle. This is like putting in a Walgreens or a CVS to some extent. And this isn't just, this isn't us, this is, and I believe I provided a citation to that in the materials that I presented to the board. So, you know, and Julius, if you have anything to say after, but I urge the board to act on the facts of this. We had 60% of Milton voters, the facts, and not some sort of knee-jerk reaction to what may or may not happen in the future. Act on the true facts of what citing a medical marijuana dispensary means for your community. Don't act on the alternative facts that are presented by the opposition. So with that, I'll turn it over to Julius if you have anything further to add.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I don't want to beat the dead horse, and I think everyone's put a lot of time and effort into this. Your concerns don't fall on deaf ears. I understand what you're saying. I think it would be a shame for a poorly written proposal of a law to really affect what the main goal of all this has been, which is to have a medical facility there. I think the one thing we do know is that over time, the regulations will loosen. They're not going to get more stringent. And what that could end up with is a facility coming here that you have no say over, but more importantly, a facility coming here where the town isn't going to benefit financially, besides really just regular taxes. Once the leather requirement goes away, which is a near certainty, people won't be coming here for host community agreements. They won't be looking to invest in the town. It'll be strictly a business decision. We've pointed out in the last time we were here, it's such a small facility. This will, just because of square footage, this can never be a facility that we're here only to make money. It simply cannot happen. It's too small. The entire business plan is centered around having one of the best doctors in the area oversee a purely medical use there. And I really urge the board to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a couple of questions on the financial summary. First of all, the $8 million is about 700 grand a week, approximately, I mean a month. On average, can you give me an idea of what it might cost a patient on a weekly basis for?
On average, patients are spending about $115 per visit to a dispensary right now in the Commonwealth. If you look at other dispensaries,
Okay, and a visit is usually once a week, or
I think it's closer to once a month per patient.
so about $115 a month.
$115 per patient.
Okay.
I have some none of these numbers were just hard-coded and typed in
Okay.
there. I have like sub sheets that.
Yeah, no, I
did all
understand,
of
I
it.
understand.
So,
So, I mean, just doing real simple math, that's about 6,100 visitors. If you use 115 divided by 700,000.
probably, well, yes, but it's also includes deliveries as well. So it wouldn't just be people showing up
Understand, okay.
to the dispensary itself, but.
So it'd be something south of 6,000 visitors a month.
Yes, we plan on doing a significant amount of deliveries, and in many marijuana jurisdictions, deliveries are an important part of it. Thus far, there's no dispensaries delivering in Massachusetts yet, so we look forward to being able to deliver from our location, because we know that there's significant patient need for that.
Yeah, I guess where I was going with that was, it's a facility without tremendous amount of parking, and, if there were, 6,000 trips to that in a month, I'm not sure if that's a lot, but it seems like a lot to me, from a parking situation, that's all. But,
I mean, if you divide it up by the hour, and let's call it 4,000 trips, if it's two-thirds
Yeah,
of being, two-thirds coming in, you divide it up by the hour, it's actually, it's not that many compared to what any other use that you would put there, whether it's a Starbucks or a CVS or a small bank or anything, you're gonna have more people going than even these numbers forecast.
yeah, okay. The other question I had was, I noticed one of your expenses was, where was it? Cultivation and rental, cultivation and Cultivation and retail, I guess, was.
It's the triple net, so it's taxes, insurance, and maintenance that we pay for. So snow plowing of your cultivation facility, insurance. I believe it's a true triple net lease that's being contemplated with
Okay.
Mr. Roberts. So, and then the same thing ultimately in Deerfield for their cultivation facility. So taxes, insurance, and maintenance.
Okay, so there's some of the Deerfield costs included in,
That's right. So what we've done is right now we have two dispensing facilities cited. So we've taken the Deerfield costs and we divided them in half and allocated half of them to the Milton facility and half of them to the Deerfield facility.
gotcha. Okay. Other than that, the rest of it seems straightforward. I don't have any other.
Yeah, I don't have any,
Questions
I
on
looked through your financials and they made a lot of sense to me. I understood them. You know, the interesting component was that, of the deliveries, because I had a concern about the amount of traffic, you know, coming in, and you answered that question, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, the one thing I would, and I'm not suggesting that we necessarily do agree to the letter of recommendation, but if we were, I would suggest that we, in the host agreement, that 1% of the 3% go to the Milton Substance Abuse directly, which would, logical sense, I think, that there's, you know, a relationship between substance abuse and get them
Well, I
some
think,
much-needed revenue.
with that being said, I think if there ever were to be, yes, but, you know, just as if, such as we're going to, you know, have an article at some point in time related to the sale of alcohol at 1%, so that would go kind of along the lines with that.
Yes.
With the monies going from any restaurant or liquor store in the town of Milton towards the Substance Abuse Coalition to help them sustain their great efforts that they're doing every day. So, yeah, I would be amenable to that.
And, you know, and the other thing, and I guess, you know, we don't know where the law's going forward. We really don't. I did hear what these gentlemen had to say, and it's not the first time I've heard it. I've heard it several times that, you know, this host community agreement may go away in the near future. And if it does, then we have no control whatsoever. So we'd be back at the same place that we are right now, worrying about, you know, if a medical marijuana facility did come in, or at that point, they could come in, as long as they, you know, as long as they comply with the zoning bylaw, then it would open us up to the same recreational.
They still have to go through the special permit process with the planning board, but yes, the
Right.
letter of support or non-opposition would be, possibly may be eliminated.
Right, yeah, we just don't know. But it is a concern, I guess.
So do we have other comments or questions from the board or from the applicant?
Well, just on the letter of support or non-opposition, you know, I appreciate Julius chiming in on that. Part of it, you know, I don't want to threaten the board with it, you know, it's not going to be us. You know, we're going to keep working on citing somewhere else, and we really want to cite in Milton. And, you know, we spent a lot of time trying to work with Mr. Roberts and want to be in that building. And in fact, you know, we didn't find that building. You know, it came to our attention because it had been vacant and in meetings, you know, that building might be a good use, because I know the town had spent some time trying to figure out what to do with it. There are groups in the Commonwealth seriously advocating to get rid of this letter of support or non-opposition requirement. I mean, I mean, right here is a perfect example of how that requirement is stifling patient access, right? It's been some months that we would have actually already submitted a special permit application, been in front of the planning board by now, and maybe been denied because of the lack of parking. You know, I don't know whether the planning board, and that's the thing, by issuing the letter of support or non-opposition tonight, the board doesn't tie the planning board's hands on granting the special permit. They still have the opportunity to evaluate all those criteria, and we can get rejected there if we can't get a waiver on the parking requirement. The problem is that location, any new commercial use is not going to be allowed because of the lack of parking. And so, you know, this is one where the town gets significant revenue and helps sick people with a responsible group. So I don't want to, I'm always reluctant to say, look, that special permit or that letter of support requirement is going to go away to really to lean on that too hard, because it's almost like saying, look, guys, either you do it now with us or you're just going to be out. And so I don't want to say that. I don't want to get adversarial, but it is, the Massachusetts Patient Advocacy Alliance is one of them. They're in the press all the time, And there's no doubt, as we can see from tonight, that the letter of support requirement is preventing patient access. I mean, there's only 9 dispensaries open in Massachusetts, 4+ years after they passed this law. And so, if that is a consideration for the board, because you got, you know, an open book here, you'll have all of our cell phone numbers, we're there to work with you, and the host community agreement that flows from the letter of support requirement, we'll work with you on putting it together in such a fashion that you'll be happy to have us. So, if that is a consideration, I appreciate bringing it up. Please consider it, because we really want to be here, and we've spent some time and effort trying to do the best we can by the town.
Okay, before we go to the public, do we have any other questions or comments from the board or from the, further comments from the applicant at this time? And we'll give you an opportunity to respond if there are further comments from the public. Okay, then if not, why don't we see if there's anyone here tonight? We do have several people in the room. Is there anyone who would like to address the board? Yes, sir. Please
Thank
come
you,
up to the
Madam
microphone. And for anyone who's coming up to the table, please state your name and your address. We'll go to you next, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Brian Bunn from 139 Adams Street,
Good
just up
evening.
the street. First, I just wanted to say how impressed I was at the last meeting and the great conversation that we had on both sides about the issue. It was nice to hear the well thought out positions from both sides, especially from a lot of the expert advice we got from our local doctors and lawyers, real estate brokers, and substance abuse counselors. I don't want to rehash all those arguments. I think we've all heard it. We've heard it here. We've heard it in the paper, on Facebook. I think we all know where most of the town stands on this issue. But one thing that I did want to raise tonight, it's one of my big fears for the town, is that it's something the town can't control and the town may not be able to afford, and that's the potential for a lawsuit regarding this proposal. My wife and I are both lawyers. We've done a lot of research on the town bylaws, on the state regulations. And it's pretty clear to us that this proposal would be in clear violation of the requirement that no dispensary be within 500 feet of an area where children congregate. At the Swift House, you're about 150 feet or so from that park right next to the Swift House. Anyone who walks by it, I walk by it 2, 3, 4 times a day. During spring through fall, you have the kids at the Milton Rowing Club every single day there. You have families playing there. We've got families down, and kids playing all the time down at Milton Landing. And so it's a real concern for me, especially given the heavy use of that area. And unfortunately, I think a lawsuit is a true and real possibility here, that I think the town has a lot of things that we'd rather spend our time and money on rather than a lawsuit. Again, I don't think it's the right time or right place and right people for this proposal. I'm not against medical marijuana. I really don't have a problem with it. I just don't think this is the right place, and we're really inviting a real issue. Also, finally, I just want to say that I do feel for Mr. Roberts. I know he's been trying to develop that property for quite a while, and it deserves to be redeveloped. And I personally would be willing to help him to get there, whatever he needs. If he wants to talk about it or help with the town, I'd be more than happy to do that. But I just think we're really inviting a big issue down the road, and it's not something that, I know we've got the Prop 2.5 override possibly coming up, and I'm not sure we want to be spending our money on things like a lawsuit about a dispensary that should be better placed somewhere in town possibly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, Tom. My name is J.P. Plunkett. I'm the Cub Scouts' father. I'm a resident of 1 Ruggles Lane, and, yeah, I'll be very brief, but I happen to be in the commercial real estate business. I'm a broker, and I didn't even know that this space was available. It was not marketed to the masses. So 2 things. Number 1, to me, Mr. Roberts should promote the site super aggressively to commercial users and, see what his choices are. I'm positive, only because I do this every day, all day, that you'd have quite a few users that mesh in better with that neighborhood. And then conversely, again, I don't have any pro or con with this particular use, but I know there's better uses for this site. There's no doubt about it. And I don't understand why they'd want to be in Milton when they could go to Dorchester, Randolph, Quincy, literally 2 minutes away, great communities where the commercial real estate costs are significantly less. And Milton residents travel now 1 to 4 minutes to do all sorts of shopping. I just don't understand why, for less rent and more profit for their business, they wouldn't do what 99% of commercial tenants do and just go to a less expensive marketplace, while Mr. Roberts markets it to a user that would fit in much better with the blend of a waterfront location, more or less. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Plunkett.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else this evening who would like to address the board? Yes. Two hands in the back, so. Good evening.
Good evening, how are you? My name is Rene Ruiz. I live at 9 Stonebridge Lane. You've seen me before, I'm sure. I have 3 points about this, and once again, I rise to speak in favor of the issuance of a letter of support. My first point is about demographics. We've talked a lot about the legalization initiative, which, for full disclosure, I was personally involved with authoring and putting it on the ballot, helping run the campaign, that sort of thing. My point about legalization is regarding demographics. As we all know, the town of Milton voted against question 4, 44% in favor. If you break down the demographics by age of this town from the Census Bureau, you see that our town skews toward the older side. 21% of our residents are 60 and older, and only 16% between the ages of 18 and 29. According to a WBUR poll that was taken in mid-October, just before the legalization vote took place, in which they broke down the demographics of support of legalization by age group, older folks, and this is consistent with every other poll that I've seen, and I've seen quite a few of them on the subject of legalization, not just here but in other states, older folks tend to be against and younger folks tend to be in favor, and that's just a demographic fact. That's not a value judgment or anything like that. In particular, in this poll, 42% of the respondents 60 and older were in favor of legalization, so that's a net negative. And every other demographic group from 18 to 59 years of age was in favor. 57% for 45 to 59, 59% for 30 to 44, and 70% of respondents between the ages of 18 and 29 were in favor of legalization. So while I appreciate the current demographics of the town of Milton, leads to us not being in favor of adult use marijuana activities, it's fairly obvious from the demographic trends that inside of one generation, this town and probably every other town in the Commonwealth will have a majority of residents of voting age who are in favor of legalization. So that's a long-term consideration. I get it. I understand that in the short term, there are some short-term risks with approving this entity. But that brings me to my second point, which is that this town needs revenue, as we know, as I mentioned last time. As we all know, there's going to be an override on the ballot. There's a long, laundry list, a wish list of government projects that we need to fund. And the political optics of an override ballot initiative, in my view, deteriorates significantly in the event that this board turns down hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential revenue that we know for a fact is on the table right now over a multi-year period, $800,000 in total revenue over a multi-year period to go into the coffers of this town, while on the other hand asking me and the other property taxpayers of this town to shoulder the additional burden that we need for, for town governance. I get that it would be a bold move on your part, politically speaking, given the current demographics, to issue a letter of non-opposition, but I would encourage you to do so anyway, if only to improve the optics and really make it easier for property taxpayers like me, who might feel like we're already paying quite a bit in property taxes per annum, to also make a bold political statement by voting in favor of the proposed override. And my third point is a technical point. We heard from the applicant that the Department of Public Health, which currently sets the regulations for that allow this letter of support to be issued or not, the Department of Public Health might take those away. I'm not familiar with the inside politics there. I haven't paid that much attention to the regulatory process for medical marijuana. But I can tell you that the DPH is an executive body, and basically this system exists at their whim. They could choose at any time to remove the requirement for a letter of non-opposition for these dispensaries to get cited, and if they were to choose to do so, this process no longer exists, and you would have to permit them like any other business, and they would have remedy. They would be able to seek remedy in court if they felt like they weren't getting due process at the select board or the planning board level. So that's one point. And then finally, on the technical side of potential ambiguities in the law, I get that there's some political risk there. If you give them the letter of non-opposition, you allow them to set up shop, there is a possibility, however remote or not, no one can really say what's going to happen going forward, that an adult use operation might try and set up shop in this town. I would argue that that's unlikely for a multitude of reasons. Number one, we don't know what the final law is going to look like. We know what the ballot initiative says, and we know the ballot initiative is law now. But there are a number of bills that are on Beacon Hill right now. I know Senate President Stanley Rosenberg and Senator Jason Lewis and Representative Bob DeLeo are all working as we speak on a joint House and Senate committee to consider a myriad of bills that would make various technical changes, some substantive, some not, to this ballot initiative. And no doubt, there's no doubt in my mind, as I'm sure you've probably heard from the Mass Municipal Association, that changes to zoning and changes to the means by which municipalities may ban recreational businesses from operating within their borders will be considered, and they probably will pass. At a minimum, I would expect the zoning issues to be cleared up. And at a maximum, it's possible they may even remove the requirement for a plebiscite, a vote of the general public, and they may just give planning boards and select boards the power to simply ban these businesses outright. And so, even if those things don't come to pass, and I think it's highly likely they will, because Bob DeLeo and Jason Lewis are both opposed to recreational marijuana, and so probably any law they pass is going to further restrict. They're not going to make it more liberal than it already is. Even if nothing gets done on Beacon Hill in that regard, the executive body that will be created to basically play the role of DPH, but for adult use marijuana, whether it's the Cannabis Control Commission as part of the Treasury Department, or whether or not they might give it to a different executive agency. It doesn't matter that much to me where the internal Beacon Hill politics end up on this. But whatever regulatory agency gets the ability to set regulations, they may very well put a letter of support proviso in the regulations that they issue in terms of getting businesses to be cited. And we may get a very similar process that we saw from DPH for adult use. And so you may, even if Beacon Hill doesn't grant you the power to ban these things outright and clear up the zoning ambiguities that you mentioned earlier, the executive body that regulates recreational cannabis sales in the Commonwealth may very well give you that power in a similar manner to the way that DPH has given you the power to have these hearings. And so for all those reasons, especially for town revenues and political boldness in light of the upcoming override, I encourage you to issue a letter of non-opposition. It doesn't have to even be support. It can be non-opposition. You personally don't have to support this to take a bold position and shore up town revenues, which I think is really the biggest issue here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was another hand in the back, and then we'll go to this man, two more hands. So we'll go to this woman, and then the two on this side of the room. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Mary Ann Rull, and I live at 58 Buckingham Road. I came to the first meeting, and I agree with the first person who spoke this evening that people are very professional in their presentation. One of the things I was impressed with in the first meeting was the security that was provided for anybody who was to come to the dispensary. there was 2 or 3 means of vetting before a person got their medication and then before they left as well. And this evening I heard that about 1/3 of the business will be deliveries. That was a concern to me. It's different than how it was presented in the first place, and it does seem to be a little bit more of a risky situation for the drivers and/or for the delivery. Does it get to the intended person? And my second point, and I'm sorry I'm not prepared, my second point is I agree with J.P. Plunkett, who said that there must be other opportunities for business. Some of the conversations around this dispensary makes us feel that this is the only type of business that could go in that site. I strongly believe that there are other options, and if a number of options were presented and this was the best one for the town, then we should go with it. But if a lot of other considerations, it doesn't seem that a lot of considerations have been made for this site. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Good evening.
Madam Chairwoman, gentlemen, I'm George Asher. I live at 182 Adams Street. I was privileged to come to the last hearing. I had really no intention of saying anything because I actually said all I wanted to the last time, but I am kind of mystified by some of the numbers that I've heard. My day job as an investment banker is kind of sitting inside of me saying $9 million a year, and just doing some rough numbers, $9 million a year in revenues tells me they're going to do 1,505 transactions a week, assuming a 40-hour week, and I don't know what you have in mind for that. That's a lot of transactions, it's a lot of traffic, and I have no idea what their margins are on these things. I am asking myself, how are they generating all of this cash based on the capital account that they have to come up with to invest, to effectively tear down a building, build it from the ground up to historical specifications, if I'm hearing properly, for a product that, honest to God, is not medicine. I don't care who is telling you it's medicine. It isn't. It has not been approved by the FDA. It has not been cleared by anybody who is in a position to do so. It has played on the emotions of the voters very successfully and has been sold and is trying to be sold to you and, frankly, bribed to you with this payment to be made on the basis of helping people. Well, my God, don't we have enough other things in the town of Milton, primary care medicine, the need for substance abuse counseling, and many other health care that are bona fide, where we should be devoting attention and we should be providing facilities for health care that has been verified and validated as health care. This is lovely, but it's really not health care. It's helping people in a very small sense of the word. And I am, frankly, surprised that it's gotten to this point. The last issue that I will raise, simply, other than looking at the finances of this organization that is promising us the moon, is to counsel you, the selectmen, with a historical figure from the Continental Congress, Dr. Lyman Hall of Georgia, when questioned about his vote going against the sense of his southern brethren to approve a Declaration of Independence, responded, an elected official is required to give his constituents not just his industry, but his judgment. So we rely on you for your judgment and to look at these facts, which can't be really refuted, and to look at the numbers, because numbers really don't lie when you look at them the right way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Escher. And there was another hand. Yes, sir. Is there anyone else after this gentleman who would like to speak tonight? Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Good evening.
Keith Driscoll, 515 Randolph Ave. Had the chance just to ask a couple questions last time, and was just taking some notes, and one of the things that I think is really important, and David mentioned it earlier, is the fact that your guys' job is not the next 5 years. It's setting precedent for the next 100 years. And, you know, when you boil it down to really what the facts are, I'm not getting back to the term, but, you know, you've got an offer on the table, but there's so many unknowns to what, forget about what we're talking about, whether it's medical marijuana. There's so many unknowns to what the actual statutes are and laws are and how ambiguous they are. We don't need to be the first person to take that step. And I think that's something to note, because you set something up on one path and you go down the line. They're offering, like I said, they have an offer. It's an offer. The offer may not be there in the future, but that's not the worst thing. And I think that's something to really consider is, what are you trying to set up? What is the legacy that we're trying to set up? It's not, doesn't necessarily need to be that the demographics coming into here, potential movers, people growing up and coming in here are gonna be in favor of it. It's what's the current best thing for the town, the best deal of town, and what's the path you wanna set going forward. And things may change where, yeah, it can come in, they can be part of, it may be something that somebody in the future wants to do, but right now, it doesn't set up that way. And the numbers, when you're talking about, forget about the percentage of deliveries, when you're talking 78,000 individual sales a year to an area that already has heavy traffic, if you're driving through there at 8, 9 in the morning, I drive through every day, it's roadblock. So you're talking adding a lot more traffic. And the location, again, within 500 feet of where kids congregate. Take the train, you see the crew boats there. It's not like they're just going there and running somewhere. The boats are actually there. So I'm not against medical marijuana, that's what people do, it's what they need. It's more of wrong place, wrong time. Regardless of what what they were selling, it's the type of business that area. And that's where I think it's kind of when you strip away kind of the different elements of it, what are you getting to the core point is that the highest and best use? And I've never seen a real estate marketing sign in front of that building. I never knew what it was. And so the fact that this all of a sudden comes in, nobody ever knew that it was even up for lease. So, my big thing is stripping away all the smoke and mirrors and kind of going, what are we trying to do right here? And to me, it's boiling down time and place and what the legacy that we're trying to do as a town. And that's really what, to me, it is. So, thank you.
Thank you,
for your
Mr.
time.
Driscoll. Okay, yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Pat Westhaver, 11 Winthrop Street. I'm sure there's a very simple answer to this question, but I'm baffled. Of medical marijuana is legal. Why is it not distributed in a hospital? And if it isn't legal, why are we even talking about it? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions from people who are here in the room this evening? Yes. Good evening.
I'm David Barr, live at 30 Canton Ave, right across from the facility. I'll be quick. I'll reiterate actually a few neighbors' points, and just I'm really concerned about the location, the amount of traffic that would bring to that location. If anything, I would like to propose a traffic light be installed, but that's another topic for another night. But I cross that intersection multiple times throughout the day, and the traffic is horrible. There's no parking at all. Again, there's a hill that you'd have to climb up if you're coming from the T. I am personally not against medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, but I think that location within the town of Milton is very troublesome to myself because I'm a neighbor, obviously, but it just doesn't have the infrastructure, the parking, the access for it to be, I think, a viable location for a facility. I think that's going to have 6,000 people a month or plus. Who knows? Maybe 4,000 with deliveries, but thank you.
Thank you. All right, last call. Was there anyone else who would like to be heard on this evening? Okay, seeing none, would the applicant like to address anything further to the board?
Could you specifically address the issue that was raised about the park and the regulations that say it shouldn't be within? Because that is an active area. I mean, not whether you want to define it as a park, it certainly is a place where people congregate.
Of course. So there, in Milton, currently, there is no setback from places where children commonly congregate. So there was a 500-foot interpretation of the regulations that applied to cities and towns. If a city and town, this is, was put out by the Department of Public Health in August of 2016, they interpreted the regs. If a city and town has any process or bylaw whatsoever, then it defaults to that bylaw. And if the city or town's bylaw doesn't specify any setback, then there is none. We went through this in Arlington, no setback whatsoever, because it doesn't specify. And we actually cited, we have special permit. We have a registration, not this group, but another one of my groups. We've done this, this is the case all over the Commonwealth. There is no setback. And this is actually also an issue for, not that, you know, everything is at issue for the selectmen, for the board, of course, but this is also an issue for the planning board. We will deal with the setback issue. This is not a green light and an approval for the rest of our application and citing. If the planning board believes that we don't fit the bylaw because of a setback issue, then we won't fit, we won't get a special permit. If the Department of Public Health believes that we're in violation of the state regulation, they will not give us the registration to operate a dispensary. But as the lawyer who actually does know the facts and not just relying on alternative facts, I can say definitively that there is no setback issue in Milton right now. It just isn't there. And so, I mean, we wouldn't be here. We would not be putting all this effort in if we thought we were going to run into a roadblock at the Department of Public Health or in front of your planning board. We do realize that there's going to have to be some waivers from the special permit process in Milton, particularly due to parking. But we feel like we can overcome them. Otherwise, you just might as well tear that location down because nothing's going to ever be on the site there. So the 500-foot issue is a non-issue right now. And the fact is, the 500-foot issue, if you think about what it's really about, if you think about, it's not about some sort of reefer madness where somebody's going to buy cannabis and go crazy on, you know, it's about people buying cannabis and going and from like in the middle of Denver or something and going across the street to a high school and selling it to high school kids, that kind of thing. This is not something where we have to be scared for our kids. There's probably people who have cannabis in their pockets in this audience right now. I mean, we understand what marijuana is in Massachusetts and nationwide. So, you know, I don't want to, like, the fact that they tried to put, that the Department of Public Health put that regulation in there to ease the minds of voters and towns, it doesn't exist in Milton right now. So I hope that helps to answer it. So just, I want to run through, and I won't belabor a lot of this stuff, I want to run through a few of these facts. So the first, you know, from Mr. Bunn, I think that we understand where most of the town stands on this issue. Most of the town is in favor of medical marijuana, 60% voted for it. There is some NIMBYism going on. Certainly, we know that the people who show up for these hearings are the ones who are against it, whether it's a development, whether it's medical marijuana, whatever it is. The people who show up for hearings are the ones that are against whatever the proposed project is. And that's just sort of the way it is. And so we can't get around that. It's far less of a turnout this time than it was last time. And we went over the 500 feet. And so the other issue that Mr. Bunn raised was lawsuits. Will there be a lawsuit from some other operation that's down there concerning if we're ever to cite there? There wouldn't be a lawsuit from the letter of support because we're not cited. But if we did make it through the whole application process and through the planning board, and there was a lawsuit, New England Patient Network agrees and will agree, and we can add this to the host agreement, we'll indemnify the town for any costs of defending an actual lawsuit. So we'll pay for it. So that solves that lawsuit issue, because there won't be a lawsuit. So far, there haven't been any. In Brookline, there's a dispensary right across the street from a nursery school. You know, there's no, you know, but we will indemnify the town for any costs of a lawsuit. So we'll pay for that. So that makes that sort of a non-issue. And it helps to show that, you know, the $250,000 where it goes. It won't go to defending legal action. I also heard something about these are the wrong people for this as well. I don't think that any of us have had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Bunn, so I'm not sure where that came from. But, you know, then I heard from the next person that they didn't know the space was available. That space has been vacant for 20 years. And no, I didn't know what was going on 20 years ago, but I'm fairly certain that at some point there was probably an advertisement to lease that space over the last 2 decades that Mr. Roberts has been paying property tax on there without having a tenant. So, because people don't know right now whether it's available, maybe there's no sign outside right now because he has a really good tenant who's willing to give a lot back to the town and help the sick people of the Commonwealth, who Mr. Roberts actually also believes in the use. And I thought at the last hearing, he was one of the most eloquent speakers, and I thought he was very convincing and thoughtful in his presentation in favor of this activity. So, but it's been vacant for 20 years. So if people don't know it's vacant, I don't know how to change that. I would think that, just the dilapidated condition of the building, if one drove by, they could see that there's nothing cited there. And then I heard, some other, why aren't we in Randolph? Well, there's only one properly zoned building in Randolph, and another group has it under agreement. Why aren't we in Quincy? Well, there's already a dispensary in Quincy. Why aren't we in Dorchester? Siting in Boston is a whole nother can of worms that we don't have probably the time to go through tonight, but we have looked at the other places in the Commonwealth, and we have looked at the other places in these population centers, and we have, been meeting with the town for many months now and thought that siting in this building was actually a good thing. We were killing so many birds with the same stone. We're solving so many issues by rehabbing this building, by helping sick people, by giving money back to the town, by giving money back to the coalition, that we thought this was actually a really good use and a good proposal. And I get it, we got the NIMBYism showing up, you can't do anything about that, and I encourage them, the people who are in opposition, to look at what's going on in the other jurisdictions around the Commonwealth. I heard something, from Mr. Ruiz about this being a bold move for the board, and I also heard, one of the last speakers talking about us being the board being the first group or the first people to take this step. Salem, Brookline, Northampton, Boston, Newton, Quincy, Brockton, Lowell, Amesbury, Franklin, Fitchburg, Taunton, Greenfield, Dennis, Plymouth, Fairhaven, Georgetown, Milford, Holbrook, Danvers, Framingham, Fall River, Cambridge, Mansfield, Millis, Southborough, Worcester, Amherst, Springfield, Sturbridge, Pittsfield, West Springfield, Hudson, Framingham, Amherst, Oxford, Hanson, Alston, Worcester, Shrewsbury, Needham, Bourne, Brewster, Gloucester, Hadley, Greenfield, Great Barrington, Somerville, Grafton, Leominster, Middleborough, Merrimack, Lee, Holyoke, Gardner. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I've just started the list. So this is not the first board that's been confronted with this that's decided to issue a letter. You're not going out on some crazy limb that many, many, many other towns haven't already done in the Commonwealth. Norwood, Sharon, Rockland, Westfield, Norwell. It goes on and on and on. So, as well as Randolph, we have a letter from Randolph, another group. So there are many, many, many towns that have been confronted with this, that have decided, look, this is the right time, it's the right activity. There's only about 4 states left in the country that don't have some type of marijuana law, whether it's decriminalizing under an ounce, medical, or adult use, or recreational. The ship has sort of sailed on this, incredible sort of fear factor thing. This is a great proposal for Milton. It truly is. It's a great group, and it's a great proposal with a lot being offered. So, I heard from, I think it was Ms. Rawl, about security, and the security for deliveries it's almost equivalent. You have to have 2 people in the car, you have to plan your route ahead of time, you have to stagger your route, you have to have GPS monitoring, you have to have a live phone call back to the point of origin, you can't stop for gas. If you change your route, you have to report it to local law enforcement and the Department of Public Health within 24 hours. Once you get to the point of delivery, you have to have a laptop. You can't use like a tablet to have somebody sign off on the delivery. It's basically moving the dispensary to that location. There's a lockbox inside the vehicle where any cannabis is stored. It's very well thought out, thoroughly regulated delivery model, which coincides with the same security requirements. So, I also heard, if there are no other options, if this is the best option for the town, then we should go with it. That's obviously what's in front of the board. Is this the best option for the town? I believe that it's the only one that really has an actual viable, sort of doable proposal for the town for that building. After a couple decades, there's been talk of moving the building. One of the things I heard last time was potentially putting an outhouse in the building. I have trouble seeing how an outhouse in that building would be better for the town than helping sick people and giving over $250,000 back to the town. So, I mean, this is a good proposal, and it's the best proposal for the town, certainly that there are right now. I heard from Mr. Ash, 1,500 transactions a week. If you knock out a third of those for deliveries, we're talking about 1,000 transactions a week. If you have 10-hour days, we're talking like 15, 17 people an hour. 17 people an hour. This is not, I mean, Starbucks does, 20 times, I don't know, but significantly more than that. I mean, any other use, we're not talking about some incredible amount of traffic where we're flooding that. Any other use that's going to be there is going to be roughly equivalent. But we're not giving back the same amount of money. We're not going to have people shopping that are brand new. You're just going to have local Milton residents who are already there anyway, depending. So this is, I mean, it's such a good thing for the town, but these astronomical numbers of 4,000, 6,000, actually do the math all the way down to the hour. 15 to 20 people an hour we're talking about. And so it's not some extreme amount of extra traffic that's there. I also heard something about, it's up to the board to sort of think about not this year, not right now, but the next 100 years. Well, I mean, I would have loved to advocate that position from the beginning. If we're talking about the next 100 years, let's talk about the next 5 years. There will be a dispensary in Milton in the next 5 years. It won't be these guys. It won't necessarily be somebody with a host community agreement. It won't be somebody who's willing to, bend over backwards to do anything that the town wants. We met with police, we met with the coalition, but there's going to be a dispensary in Milton in the next 5 years. There just will be. There are going to be many, many more dispensaries around the Commonwealth over the next, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So the idea that somehow that there won't be if we deny the letter of support or non-opposition today, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so we went through all the towns, the traffic. I don't know if the board wants me to, go into the discussion about why this isn't in a hospital or at a Walgreens or a CVS and the conflict between federal and state law. I'm a true believer in medical cannabis. I've seen how it helps sick people. MS is one of the main ways I've seen it. I wish it was properly studied and sold at Walgreens, and every sick person wouldn't have to rely on, Biogen and Big Pharma to bring them medicine, because it actually incredibly helps. So I wish, and I agree, that I would love to see this studied, dispensed from hospitals and Walgreens, but it's not. And this is the way it's being done, and this is a group with a doctor who's here to do it. So again, I've repeated this a couple times, but I just really hope that we cannot rely on, misinformation and fears that are just based on a perception of what happened in Venice Beach 20 years ago as opposed to the well-regulated market of Massachusetts. And I encourage the board to do, what the will of the voters in Milton is, and not just a few people who turn out in opposition, but that's to cite this well-regulated dispensary at 98 Adams. And in the event that the board elects not to approve this proposal, I would hope that the vote would be limited to simply disapproving this proposal and allow New England Patient Network to continue searching for other locations throughout Milton. But we want to be here. This seems like the spot, and we've heard from people in the town that this building needs to be used, and we want to be the ones to use it. So I encourage the board to vote in favor of issuing a letter of non-opposition so we can continue down the application path. This doesn't open it up. We still have to do so many things, special permit being not the least of them. So that's, I encourage the board to vote in favor of the letter of support or non-opposition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Sokol. Thank you all for your presentation tonight and for all the comments that we received this evening. So I'd like to turn to the board for our comments and, are there any other questions from the board for the applicant?
For the app, I don't think so. I think it's all been explained pretty well. Yeah, I hear all the residents that got up and spoke today. And I heard the presentation. It seems to me, whether we have the medical marijuana, I don't think is our biggest fear. I think the biggest fear in terms of substance abuse is the recreational law that has come in, and there is nothing we're going to do that is going to stop individuals from growing marijuana. It's legal, and you can't ban it.
Right.
You cannot ban it. And I will guarantee you there are going to be hundreds of 21, 22, 23-year-old kids out there with their 14 to 15 plants gonna happen.
Well, there are limits even on the number of
There
plants.
are,
so
I know. I don't know what the
that's
number
not-
is, but-
I believe it's 6, but 12
But
per
6,
household, so.
Yeah, but whatever it is, but there are gonna be several out there. So, you know, we're not gonna do anything about that. You know, I do truthfully believe that medical marijuana is medical marijuana, and that will be the only use of it. That patients will come in, it'll, you know, that there's enough security, there's enough control, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to, what's been described as the process for getting the prescription, getting, you know, through DPH and everything else, is quite a rigorous process. So I don't have an awful lot of fear of the medical side of it. You know, part of me wishes it was a different location. You know, from a lack of parking is a concern. There's another side of me that says they're absolutely right. You know, that we've had a committee together for months trying to figure out what the hell to do with that building, and we haven't figured it out yet. It certainly would save the building. It certainly would bring it back. You know, it would certainly give Mr. Roberts a lot of money. So, you know, like I said, I don't have a tremendous fear of it. That's kind of where I am right now.
Well, I don't think it's a question of fear or a question of not being bold. To me, the question is this specific location, and then the greater question of the state of the law on the recreational side of the house and how that impacts medical marijuana. I'm the one who brought up the master plan at the last meeting, and I think the applicant did as good a job as possible trying to address the master plan by talking about economic revitalization and some revenue issues. The Wharf Street area, and I do serve as this board's representative on the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and the Wharf Street area is also a recreational area. It is a business district, but it's also a recreational area. We do have high school crew team using the facility. We're actually doing a lot of work trying to get a new dock for that location, and over the long run, it's not going to be on the immediate horizon, but build a storage location for the cruise shells and make greater access available to the general public for that area. So there's also the farmer's market, and there are children's activities that take place at the farmer's market. The library does a regular program at the farmer's market, which is once a week during the fall, the spring, summer, and fall seasons. So it is very close to an area where there are youth and young people that are using on a regular basis. The wharf area is something we're trying to revitalize, and the question is this use of the Swift Hat Shop building, which admittedly has been vacant for many years. We've been looking for a way to preserve it. We're not sure if we're going to be able to preserve it. That's the goal, but I think everyone who's been involved in the effort to try to preserve the Swift Shop realizes that may not be possible in the long run, but it's something we've been trying to do. This proposal would bring the building down to foundation and then replicate it. So we're not really talking about preservation as much as we're talking about replication.
Correct.
I agree with you, Tom. There's a real parking issue there. There's also a driveway that belongs to the plumbing business behind the property, and there's an easement for access over that driveway, but there's an abutting business that would also need to be taken into consideration. Having given it a lot of thought, I think this is the wrong location for a medical marijuana facility. Our bylaw, and Milton voters did approve the medical marijuana question in 2012 and also put into place a medical marijuana bylaw that would allow business districts to be the only location for medical marijuana. I will say that at the conference that the district attorney's office had, they urged all of the towns and communities that were participating that this is the time really to revisit medical marijuana bylaws, because whatever is allowed for a medical marijuana facility could potentially also be allowed for recreational. And I think that's something we're going to have to revisit, and I put that on the agenda for later on to talk about trying to start an effort to really examine that, as well as talk about the ballot question and how we would go about handling recreational through town meeting and a ballot question. But aside from it being the wrong location, even if, and Mr. Romano alluded to this at the end, that the applicant, if they're denied a letter of non-opposition or support for this location, they might still like to look in other areas in Milton. I would not be in support of issuing a letter of opposition on any medical marijuana proposal unless and until such time as we have clarity from the state and we're comfortable with where the recreational law is, so, and we have chance to put a ballot question out and see whether the voters who did not accept the ballot question in November, I think you said, David, by about a 10% margin, they voted it down. So it was a fairly significant margin that the question was not voted in favor of by Milton. And I understand Mr. Weese's point that the demographics may change over time, and it's possible if this question were asked 20 years from now or a shorter period of time than that, there may be a different outcome. But that's the current view of the town that was expressed with a very high percentage, because it was a presidential election with very high turnout. And a large number of voters in Milton spoke to that question, did not want recreational sales, do not want recreation to be approved. What we can put on the ballot is a question to limit sales, cultivation, and manufacturing facilities. As you said, Tom, obviously, we cannot regulate personal use or personal consumption. That would be permitted under the state law. So my view would be to not support this letter of opposition. I recognize the effort that has been made by Mr. Romano and by his clients. The medical director's resume is very impressive. I believe there is evidence in the literature and on the news reports that medical marijuana use for medical purposes, such as Parkinson's disease or cancer or MS, that there is a benefit to it. There is also a medical marijuana facility not far away, right over in Quincy. I think this is the wrong location, and now is not the time to act to allow or to issue a letter of support, because there's so much uncertainty and so much ambiguity in the state law regarding recreation. I think we have to see how the legislature addresses recreational use before we would consider entertaining a letter of non-opposition on any medical marijuana facility.
Okay, thank you, Katie, and thank you, Tom. All good comments. Katie, you stole a lot of what I had to say, but first I want to thank Neppen and Valerio for your professionalism throughout this entire process. I think that you brought a lot of education to a lot of people. I think that you listened to a lot of the concerns of the community, as did we. And for that, I thank your professionalism and appreciate that. Like Katie said, well, first I ought to say that I'm not opposed to medical marijuana and the benefits that it has to some people. I recognize that. I recognize that the voters in Milton, as you said, 60-40, voted in approval of that. At the same point, obviously, we had another ballot question, question 4, that in Milton, with regard to the adult use, was over 10% in disapproval of that. With that being said, I'd like to get some more clarity from the state as well. I think that a ballot question would be sensible down the road. This location in particular, while I know we spoke a lot about the actual facility and the beautification of the facility, well, that doesn't really move my needle much. Okay, my real concern is the location specifically, and the types of people that travel by that location, the fact that there is an MBTA station close by, a park, community rowing, and a waterfront that we are going to revitalize, that will be a jewel for our town. So with that being said, I strongly oppose and deny the request from New England Patient Network for a letter of support. I think that maybe down the road, and we can have more conversations when we get more clarity, that there could be other locations that fit. But I think there's a lot more discussion that needs to be had before at least I, as a board member, can agree to anything of this sort.
In terms of the ambiguous laws with respect to the recreational or marijuana, and I agree they really are ambiguous. Sooner or later there is going to be, well, don't guarantee, but in all likelihood, at some point in time, we will have a medical marijuana facility, whether we approve this one now or wait. And worst case, if you think about the worst case scenario of the recreational law, that we are reading that correctly and it doesn't change and one comes in, again, we're not gonna stop it. At some point in time, we're not gonna stop it. It's gonna come in. If it can find a place and we have the zoning.
Well,
And we cannot, under the medical law, take away the zoning. We can restrict it a little more maybe, but you can't take it away.
No, but, there was discussion, just for purposes of the discussion, I'll point out that at the district attorney's program, that it's possible that medical will really get eclipsed by recreational at some point over time, and really, that's where most of the energy and the resources will be
possibly.
directed. And that is and so recreational is something that we can put a ballot question to the voters on, and presumably the voters having voted in November one way, presumably, I think our presumption going into that would be that they would vote the same way to restrict recreational
I agree.
facility sales.
And
I
Tom,
agree.
I
They probably
agree,
would.
you know, and to Valerio's point, and Mr. Sokol, yeah, we voted in favor of this, and, you know, there's no question, I mean, you guys have a good group, and yeah, we could be seeing another group coming down the pike. But this location in particular, so let's just
Well,
stick with that right now.
that's the point I was making.
Let's focus on that one right now.
Is the point Katie made of just closing the door 100% until the recreational law is, is finalized, which may be a year or 2 or 3 from, I don't know. Or, and if it's finalized in the worst case scenario that, it's left exactly the way it is, we're still at risk.
We are, but you know.
And what we
Hey,
don't
look
do.
at- Tom, all due respect, but other towns have gone down this road as well, like us.
Oh, sure.
And have done what we're doing. So I think that Milton is a town, and I appreciate Mr. Ruiz's comments related to the override and monies, but this is Milton, okay? We're different. We've always risen above to meet the needs of our children, meet the needs of our residents, to make sure that we're strong enough to survive. That's what makes us unique. That's why we've survived for so many years without a commercial tax base, because our residents deserve that. They have their wants and needs, and they find ways to get things done, okay? And I think this is another place where we'll see that we will rise above it and we'll move forward and get things done.
Okay.
I would like to reiterate David's point. All of us did meet individually with Mr. Romano before we had the meeting in December, and that, at least in my case, was probably in all of our cases, was prior to the ballot question being decided in November. The presentations have been very professional throughout, and we appreciate you providing the additional information to us. So thank you very much for your participation and for all of the information that you have given us, and for attending both of these meetings, and for the additional outreach you did in between. I think you're hearing all of us say we recognize that there are medical uses for this product of marijuana that for many people may be a real need. The question is just this location and this time, given the uncertainty at the state level. And I think Mr. Driscoll summed it up pretty well when he said wrong place, wrong time. That's my view. We might differ a bit on how long it might take for the process to play out at the state, and how long we might want to, or whether that second part, wrong time, how long that might last. But I think sounds like that's pretty much where we're all at. So, and thank you to all of the residents who are here tonight and who have emailed us and who have participated or phoned the board and taken part in some way or another to share your thoughts and your comments. Do we want to make a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to deny the request from New England Patient Network for a letter of support or non-opposition regarding a proposed medical marijuana facility at 98 Adams Street.
I'll second the motion. Do we have any discussion on the motion?
Nope. We've had some.
Then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous. All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break so that we can allow the room to clear, and then we'll come back and we'll finish our agenda. right, we're back after our break, and we're going to move on to number 9 on our agenda, which is a discussion of warrant articles submitted for the May town meeting by the Town Government Study Committee. There are two. One is relating to a procurement officer, and one relates to the Personnel Board. And I went to the Town Government Study Committee's meeting last week to hear the discussion, mainly on the procurement officer, but I did not hear the entire discussion about the Personnel Board, but that was the majority of the time that they spent. They were meeting with the Personnel Board, so there was a lot of discussion back and forth, and there was not agreement on everything between the Government Study Committee and the Personnel Board. That's a fairly lengthy article. They did ask at one point if we would be interested in co-sponsoring this one with them, and that might be something we want to think about.
The procurement officer one? I mean,
The
the
Personnel Board. We have already voted to co-sponsor the procurement officer.
Right.
So that may be one, and that's a shorter article, that may be one we might have more of a discussion about. The Personnel Board, again, there's not, both committees are not on the same page, but they're trying to work towards a common goal. So we have a draft, but they may have even further revised it as a result of the meeting last week, and I don't think we have the most recent draft.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have comments that we want to provide to them, since we are the ones who asked them to consider the role of the Personnel Board over the last couple of years.
I just have a question on the procurement officer one.
All right, why don't we start with that one?
So, Chapter 30B, Section 2 is where they define what the chief procurement officer is. And they define it as the purchasing agent appointed pursuant to Chapter 41, Section 103, which basically says that a city that accepts this section in the manner provided in the following section, or has accepted previous earlier laws, or a town that accepts this section. So if a city accepts it, I guess they have to go to a referendum vote if a town accepts it. But it seems like you would have to, if you want to go the Chapter 41, Section 103 route, you would have to accept, the town would have to accept that general law. That law has specifics in it that you actually have a procurement, a central purchasing department that all purchases have to go through. Anything over $1,000 has to be, well, not bid, but at least competitively procured. So it's a pretty onerous. But then as you go on to read Chapter 30B, it says, or any city or town which has not accepted the section, an individual duly appointed by a city having a city manager, or a town having a town manager, by a town manager or any other town by a selectman. So it sounds like as you read Section 30B, Section 2, if you're not going to be going the Chapter 41, Section 103, unless your charter prohibits it, that it doesn't require a warrant article. That we have the ability to do it ourselves.
Okay, I haven't read that statute you referred to, but what we do have in place is the Chapter 65 that was passed of the Acts of 2016. That's the statute that created the Strong Town Administrator.
Yep.
What the Strong Town Administrator statute says is that the town administrator will appoint the chief procurement officer.
Right.
So we have that in place.
So there's nothing that we know of in our bylaws or in our charter that would preclude us from doing it without a town meeting vote.
So you're questioning whether this article is needed?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and the article is to see if the town will create the position in town government of chief procurement officer, whether by bylaw, special legislation, or otherwise, and to set the duties and responsibilities of the position. And it also asks for an appropriation. So this, the draft recommendation that the Town Government Study Committee is working from, and it's still in draft, is that, again, the town administrator shall appoint a chief procurement officer, and then these other provisions relate to the amount of money over which the CPO would need to approve expenses. There was a
Right.
question as to whether this would apply only on the non-school side or both the town and the schools.
You can write,
And I
it
think-
seems to me you can write it any way you want.
Yeah.
If you're not going to adopt Chapter 41, Section 103. If you do, then it's townwide.
All right, so it sounds like a question we want to start with is, is the question you've raised about, so it's chapter 41, section
Section 103.
103.
It's very short, it's only a paragraph long.
So the question is, do we even need a warrant article to create a bylaw, or is this existing special legislation enough? Is that correct?
Right, yeah, there wouldn't be a bylaw per se, it would just be a selectman appointed position.
Well, it's town administrator
No, it would go
appointed.
to the-
Town administrator, yeah.
Under
Yeah, because we
chapter
do have the,
65.
our charter allows that.
And for the interim, the town administrator, which is permissible, which we contemplated when we wrote that legislation, town administrator has appointed himself as the CPO for the time being, because we
There's nobody else to do
the
it.
state requires us to have somebody in place as the CPO.
Correct.
And, so, okay, so that's a question we should send back to the
Yeah.
Town Government Study Committee, and maybe to Town Council to look into this question. Are there other comments, I guess, specifically on this draft recommendation, and maybe Mr. Dennehy has some comments that he wants to bring to everyone's attention?
No, I would just, the chapter 65 is pretty clear that I've been, I have the authority to appoint a chief procurement officer, or be one myself. We've spoken to the
Right.
state about that. I will say that if we are to name a person and it's going to be townwide, the discussion was whether it would be a part-time or a full-time job. I think it would warrant a full-time position. If it was just on the town side and not the school side as well, I think it would be of part-time nature.
Yeah. The only other thing that you would question is, because of our personnel bylaw, do we have to create the position?
Oh, through the classifications?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's, well, and, all right, and that one is also under, well, I guess that's the classification schedule, but the bylaw itself is also under consideration.
Right.
All right, so I know the Government Study Committee had some questions that they asked of not only Mr. Dennehy, but also of Town Accountant Amy Dexter, for comments, and the $5,000 threshold also was one that was being debated. Is it too low for a $100 million budget? That was one of the comments that came from the Town Accountant. I don't know, Mike, if you had any further, you and Amy had any
So one of the
conversations?
questions that was gonna be one of the things that
Okay,
I, in my opinion, with a $100 million budget, thought it was a little bit too low, but, you know, I'll defer to the town administrator for his input on that. I thought that, you know, a $10,000 threshold would be more amenable, but I'll defer to you.
Yeah, I would agree with Selectman Burns that $5,000 number is a bit small for a budget as large as $98 million, $100 million.
okay.
Yeah, I think what you could perhaps do is you know, if it's under 10, but above 5, perhaps have the department head or whoever is procuring competitively procure as opposed to, and competitively could be just oral quotes but, you know, something to.
Sure.
So you get you vetted somehow the price of the thing.
This draft recommendation says that if the CPO is not certified at the time that they're appointed, that there would be a 3-year period in which they would obtain, it's called the Massachusetts Inspector General's Office certification as a Massachusetts certified public purchasing official.
Mhm.
And there was some question at the Government Study Committee as to whether 3 years was the right period of time. I don't think they came to any conclusion on that. They did have some discussion about what would happen if someone was hired for the position and didn't obtain the certification within 3 years. Would there be maybe an extension for 1 year or some other grace period? And it was even a fundamental question, should the CPO be required to be certified? I think everyone on the committee felt that that probably should be a requirement.
Yeah, because, I mean, there's a lot of Mass General law that you're trying to absorb, I think, so, yeah, probably would be a good idea.
The committee was also going to be sending this draft of a recommendation out to all the independent boards, to the school assistant superintendent for business and for others, to get everyone's input into this. So are there any other comments that we should bring back to them?
I don't have any further.
Okay. Tom, anything else?
No.
No? Okay. All right. The other one is the Personnel Board article, and again, this one is fairly lengthy. And we're not working off the most recent draft, because they were revising it as they had the meeting. But, so I guess in general, so what this current draft does would take the Personnel Board out of approving the hiring of positions, new employees, and make the Personnel Board more of a committee that's looking at policies and procedures in the employment context, performing an oversight function. Members of the Personnel Board felt that there should still be a check and balance, and that their role is important for checks and balances. So there was not agreement on everything.
I agree with that. That's something I think that is very important, you know, to have a group that can provide that oversight. But I think that, you know, we're working on a document that isn't up to date, so it's gonna be tough to comment much on it, because there'll be some changes.
Yeah, I think we should probably circulate, get the most recent version, circulate that again, and maybe put this one back on for
Yeah, that's fine.
discussion at a future date. There is a reference, and I just want to bring to everyone's attention, it would require us to annually adopt, I'm trying to find it, but it's an affirmative action policy, and the Assistant Town Administrator, Paige Ippolito, and I were at the meeting, and we brought to their attention the fact that we don't currently do that, and they said, well, it's something they'd want this board to adopt annually, and I suggested to them, with Paige's support, that we'd probably want to have the Personnel Board, since that's their area of expertise, and we're not always going to have human resources experts on the Board of Selectmen. We currently don't, and we may not, you know, at some point, there may be someone in the future who's got that experience, but not necessarily a given, whereas the Personnel Board, at least the majority of them, should have a lot of day-to-day expertise in this area. So I suggest that we would probably be looking to them for a recommendation before we would adopt something annually, to figure out the details.
Yeah.
And the goals. Okay, so why don't we take that approach? We'll get the updated draft circulated, and we'll send them the questions and comments we have on the procurement officer. Okay, the next item on our agenda is to appoint our animal control officer as the hearing authority. We had a revised motion that came over by email, and I'm just pulling it up. This follows on our discussion at the last meeting, where we wanted to identify the animal control officer as the person who would conduct the hearings and not only issue recommendations to this board, but issue orders that could then be appealed to the district court, and for nuisance dogs or dangerous dogs. So based on our prior discussion, I will entertain a motion that the Board of Selectmen, pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 140, Sections 136A and 157, appoint Animal Control Officer Nancy Bersani as hearing authority to handle dog complaints.
Second.
All right, so one of them is a so moved and the other is a second, and any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next we have a reserve fund transfer request from this board relating to town administrator, wage and salary line relating to the transition of the town administrator role.
I'll propose a motion to approve and forward to the warrant committee a reserve fund transfer request to the Board of Selectmen salary and wage line in the amount of $59,933 to cover a shortfall regarding the town administrator's salary.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have the FY18 budget and some one-time requests on our agenda, and we'll ask the town administrator to lead this.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Approaching our 7th week working on the budget. As all of you know from the MMA conference last Friday and Saturday, the governor came out with some good news about the revenues. He saw a 3.9% increase in revenues, which translated to a little over $463,000 on the plus side. We had town accountant Amy Dexter had conservatively looked at that number in a negative 2%, just to be sure that we were in, a very conservative approach to that. Unfortunately, Wednesday the cherry reports came out, and we didn't see quite the improvement we thought we would. In fact, some of our costs, actually, the assessments, be it the county assessments, MBTA assessment, mosquito control, and some other items, the retired teachers' health insurance, grew a lot more than we anticipated. So the long and short of it is we are looking at a $1.5 million shortfall on our non-contingent budget. Through some very productive and active discussions over the last week, we've brought in public safety officials, Chief Grant, Chief King, Public Works Joe Lynch, Consolidated Facilities Bill Ritchie, Trace Richards from Cemeteries, Will Adamczyk from Libraries, and various members of the school department to talk about where that shortfall shall be met. We are 0.5% from balancing that budget, $98 million non-contingent budget at this time. So a tiny bit of work to do tomorrow before we present to the warrant committee. But again, I want to thank Anne Marie Fagan, the outgoing town administrator, and town accountant Amy Dexter for their diligence, as well as the various department heads and executives that put these budgets together, and some have met with us for a fourth or fifth time to try to sharpen pencils. So again, we have a tiny bit of work to do to balance that and present to the warrant committee tomorrow night.
Okay, great. And do we want to talk about one-time funding requests that we may want to consider?
Sure. So I believe it was mentioned at one of the Board of Selectmen hearing that we have about $1.375 million worth of free cash from FY16's budget. I've identified a couple of possible one-time capital infrastructure moves that we could make. I'd really like to get the LED retrofitting program going. Jack Calabro has done 2 small phases. Roughly, there's about 3,300 lights in the town. To this point, only 3% of them, portion of Central Ave, portion of Reedsdale Road, and a section over off Blue Hills Parkway, have been retrofit. I'm looking for a 2-year plan, approximately half of the remaining lights, about 1,500 lights this year, and use that with free cash, or if we have to, come up with some bonding if necessary. But I think it's time to get moving on this. There's incentives involved with retrofitting these lights. Talked to the Eversource representative today, would be looking at about 25 cents per kilowatt hour as an incentive on these lights, which could translate, if we can get them out on the street and retrofit in the next couple of months, hopefully.
Any idea what that translates to?
It's about $75,000 or $100,000 in an incentive this year.
Is that an annual
Well,
savings?
the ones for the 1,500 we install this year, you get paid incrementally. So if we put them in May, then we'd get, those 7 months of the year.
That's a one-time payment.
One-time hit, and the same thing for next year with the what we would call the fourth phase, fourth and final phase.
Okay.
Yeah, we were thinking of doing the major thoroughfares in the business districts.
And then savings in terms of the annual operating costs?
Yes, we pay about 17 cents per kilowatt hour now. We could see that cut, if not in half, maybe a third of the cost. They're more efficient lights. The long-term maintenance repair is another efficiency that would be built into that, where you're not chasing lights that are out. The jury is still out, but these lights should last about 15 to 20 years. So there's cost savings from a utility bill perspective.
Pretty quick payback.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that's something we're looking at. And then just a lot of the neighborhood associations I've met have talked about some traffic calming measures. So I looked into some variable messaging boards, which we could use from time to time, and some radar signal, all portable stuff that you can put on the road. I brought a sample of them here today, but basically this is the variable message board that you could put any message that the town would like to promote, and I think these are kind of efficient as well. These radar speed monitors that we can move around the town to. They've had great success in Boston. They use the fixed ones. They would affix it to a pole or a traffic signal. These would be more portable. We can move them around the town where necessary, and I think that would be a great use of free cash this year.
Especially if we do adopt a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Right.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that we've heard it far too often with cut-through traffic, people coming from outside of the town, going above and beyond the speed limit. We've heard it from neighborhood associations that having these measures in place will calm traffic. It's proven, and that I think it would be a great asset, especially to use with our free cash.
Thank you.
What about roads? I know, Tom, that's often been a
Yeah,
topic you've brought up many times, one-time funding requests.
We've got the warrant article. I think we do have something in the capital plan for roads, but it's not a huge number. By not huge, it's probably $400,000 or $500,000 that's in there for, and again, that would probably be one-time money.
So you'd be requesting that from the capital committee's thinking of requesting that from one-time money?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because we haven't gone through the whole plan yet, so I'm not sure how it's gonna break down, whether it's bonding money or one-time money.
Okay.
Yeah, just some other ideas we were talking about, maybe putting some more money into OPEB. Trying to play catch up on stuff. Or perhaps the Affordable Housing Trust. Take a chunk of that and possibly put that in there for, start building that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've typically used free cash for things like, well, OPEB more recently, but also just the stabilization funds generally and other one-time expenses. The two that I wanted to keep on the list, because we've got extra funding based in the contingent or the override budget for both of them. One is the law budget and one is the master plan implementation committee's separate article. Both the planning board and this board have requested an appropriation of $50,000 to implement the master plan. And, you know, possibly that could get funded through, in the contingent budget through an override vote, but in the non-contingent budget, if that's what we're gonna be stuck with for next year, then that's probably an appropriate use of free cash. So I'd like to keep both the law budget and the master plan implementation committee's request as topics for one-time, as requests for one-time funding when we have once there's a breakdown and an actual request made to the warrant committee.
Yeah, in terms of the stabilization funding, so, again, the OPEB funding, we started off for a little bit, it being part of the operating budget. It was, you know, it was a recurring, very small percentage. And that is kind of morphed into one-time money now, which it really shouldn't be. It should be, you know, once you get it into the operating budget, keep it there is, you know, I mean, basically we just kind of move that money back up into line items.
Is it currently, how is it in the current draft of the budget?
Last year was one-time money.
Okay, so it's not in the current operating,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the speakers at the MMA had spoken about cities and towns are starting to put their arms around the fact that you may include a percentage of collective bargaining agreements to start to pay it forward, basically. Make it part of your collective bargaining agreement when you negotiate some of your contracts, that a portion of that collective bargaining will be to fund the OPEB going forward. It's proactive, it's a pretty unique idea. I heard it and thought, wow, that might be something that we could help fund the future with current contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once we fully fund retirement, then we should be able to transfer that contribution over to OPEB.
Right.
But that's several years out.
That's, yeah, still out.
Okay, anything else for one-time funding requests? All right, we're on to the town administrator's report.
Sure, so most of the stuff I was gonna talk about is what we talked about with the free cash and the budget. Obviously, we have to trim the budget, balance the budget a little more tomorrow. Some active dialogues scheduled to get to that number and present to the warrant committee. I think it's been a very diligent process to this point, and look forward to presenting to them tomorrow night. The only thing, and I was remiss in mentioning that 1,500 LEDs retrofit would roughly cost about $375,000. I think it's well worth it with the incentives and utilities you get back. We are investigating a grant with MAPC and the DOER to see if that's the route we want to go. The price of the luminaires and fixtures has come down over the years, so it's a better time to be doing it than it was 4 or 5 years ago, because they were at a premium, and now the technology has caught up to itself, and it's a bit cheaper, so. I think that's something we should tackle in the next 2 years, and the town should see a significant savings.
Green Community Grant too, or?
Yeah, that's through MAPC is working with Green Communities.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And the ultimate goal is of these groups and Eversource is to get inside the building and make sure that all of your lights inside the building is as well or as efficient as the ones on the street.
Yeah, I think we pretty much have done that. A lot of these things are now LED.
Yeah. So there's an audit involved, and they'll take a look at what the assets you have and what the turnover could be.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, briefly, I wanted to just mention, we've covered most of it, but given the uncertainty that exists at the state level regarding the recreational or adult use marijuana law, and our desire to put a question to the voters, I think it would make sense to delegate, or designate, rather, a member of this board to work with the planning staff, with the town council, with the town administrator, maybe with a member of the planning board, since they've put forward a moratorium article, to really take a look at whether our medical marijuana bylaw needs to be reevaluated, which is what was the suggestion that came out of the Norfolk District Attorney's Conference last Friday. They said this is really the time to look at them because of the potential for recreational to be cited in the same location where you can cite a medical marijuana facility, and also to determine when and in what order we should consider for a ballot question and a town meeting article. So I think there's so much uncertainty around this area that we should probably get a little working group together, primarily of the planning staff and town council and the town administrator, but I think it would be good for a member of this board, and we could invite a member of the planning board to maybe join us, or to at least have a discussion about their temporary moratorium article,
I agree.
to make sure that we're protecting the interests of the town given all the ambiguity that exists. So is that something that the board
I think
would be
it's a
willing
good-
to do?
I think it's a good idea.
Yep.
Okay, if either of you are interested in doing that, I'm happy to step back. I'm also happy to do it, whatever. If anyone has a real desire to do this, then that might make sense for one person to take this on.
I mean, I'd be happy to do it, it's just that I have to step off it after a few months, so.
Great.
All right,
Yeah, so I mean, I'm happy to do it if, unless you'd like to do it. I mean, we can talk about this. I guess
Okay,
let's look,
yeah.
why don't we look at,
Why don't we at least-
let's
at
take a
least
look at
we're
our
on the
duties
same
and
page.
where we are, yeah, but
Yeah.
we're on the same page and figure
Okay.
out what makes most sense for us as a board
okay.
and what we have divvied up for now.
All right, that sounds good. And then the second thing is just to report out to the public that 131 Elliott Street, which is the Henry's project, the planning board issued a special permit last Thursday, which is good news. We're moving along. The next step is the Conservation Commission, and hopefully we'll be able to get the project to a hearing before the Conservation Commission in February or March at the latest, but hopefully we'll get it onto the February agenda for the Conservation Commission. So thank you to the planning board, and especially to Alex Whiteside. The planning board went through a painstaking review, page by page, of the draft of the special permit, which they had already commented on and had some discussion about back in the fall. But it was a good result, so that
Good.
project's moving forward.
Good.
Do we have any reports tonight?
I just want to, we haven't met since, I congratulate the community as a whole for their collaboration in the evolution of the Wellness Center at Milton High School. You know, the MFE in particular, who helped raise the funds, the teachers, that, you know, and the athletic trainers and Principal Jet for their passion, their hard work, for kind of pulling it together. I think it's going to help the community as a whole, not just the students, but the teachers, faculty, not just kids who play sports, other kids. So I think that it's going to be a domino effect, and I think that it's long overdue. It'll help the sports teams, it'll help wellness, obesity, and all the things that we discuss on a daily basis, you know, kind of brighten up the future for the kids. So that's all I want to say.
Good. Anything else?
No.
Do we have any citizen speak response? We didn't have any tonight, but future agenda items? We've covered that quite a bit.
Yeah, we're going to be meeting on the pilot program next week. Both Administrator Dennehy, myself, and Jim Henderson from the Assessors Board. So we're going to be starting to tackle some items related to that, and really start to move forward on some plans and a strategic plan to kind of bring pilot to fruition here in Milton.
All right, any other future agenda items? And if not, we have an executive session. We also are going to have a meeting with the Governor Stoughton trustees, but that also will be executive session. So I will move that we enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to non-union personnel, Consolidated Facilities Director, and strategy with respect to union personnel, police and fire, believing that having such discussions in open session would have a detrimental effect on the board's negotiating position, and to re-enter open session for the purpose of adjourning.
Second.
Mr. Burns?
Yes.
Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So we're now in executive session, and we will then have a meeting of the Governor Stoughton trustees, only in executive session, and then we will adjourn.